Okay, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Joint Conceptual Workshop for May the 27th, 2021. We've got an action-packed, tight agenda, so I'm going to do my best to keep us on schedule. Start off with a call to order. Commissioner Allen.
Present.
Commissioner Franks.
Present.
Commissioner Harrison.
Present.
Commissioner Lindsay, or Chair Lindsay, I'm present. Commissioner McLemore.
Present.
Commissioner Mann.
Present.
Commissioner Orr.
Present.
Alderman Peterson.
Present.
And Commissioner Williamson.
Present.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman McClendon. Alderman Speedy. Alderman Martin. Alderman Barnhill. Alderman Blanton. Alderman Shorer.
Here.
And Mayor Moore.
Present.
Great. Okay. We still have a phrase to read. The Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Franklin Municipal Planning Commission Joint Conceptual Workshop will limit physical access in the meeting room to prevent further spread of COVID-19 and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the City of Franklin officials, staff, and citizens. Accommodations have been made to ensure that the public is able to view the meeting. The public may view the workshop in the following ways: watch the meeting on Franklin TV or the City of Franklin website, watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts, attend in person in the boardroom. The public may sit in the boardroom if social distancing can be met, or watch the meeting on the TV in the lobby. So our first item tonight under new business, item number 1 is the discussion of an Envision Franklin amendment requesting a change from conservation subdivision design concept to neighborhood mixed-use design concept with a special consideration for property located at 1740 New Highway 96 West near the intersection of New Highway 96 West and Mack Hatcher Parkway, otherwise referred to as the short property. So we'll start off with staff comments? No comments? Okay. You got to fix this. So we'll go to the applicant. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Mayor Moore, Alderman, Chairman Lindsay, Planning Commission. Just briefly, how did we get here? The Short family's been in Williamson County since probably the inception of Williamson County, from the Carter House to the Bennett House on 4th Avenue, Bennett Hardware Store on 4th Avenue, and the Short family who's farmed in Williamson County for 5 generations now. As we look at the growth and property and kind of where we are now, and we've been involved in the West Basin study, I'd like to just tell you briefly, I represent several family members that are watching, but we wanted to let you all know we're very interested in the conservation of property, preservation of history, but we felt a lot of growth in the last 20 years, especially in the last couple of years. And as Mack Hatcher prepares to open, we find ourselves on one of the main corners in Franklin. We've got several ideas that the family felt very strongly about, keeping agriculture in the forefront of Franklin, keeping the small town feel in the forefront, and preserving green space. And these were all things that, as we've looked at this Western Basin, these were all key objectives that needed to happen. We're also focusing on education, helping people know where does their food come from, and how do we fit into the community and keep part of that Williamson County and Franklin feel. We've got, again, this family vision, and we've had Greg Gamble and several other consultants employed by the family to help figure this out. As this came to the forefront of this Western Basin, we decided, we need to have a plan of action. Franklin's moving our way. We're not in the county, we're now in the city, and we're not in the country anymore, right? We're on the, kind of on the main road. So without more than that, I'd like Greg Gamble to help kind of tell about where the family has gone through this journey. He's helped us kind of corral a whole lot of thoughts and put a really good plan together, we feel like. We're doing this as a family. We're not doing this as a developer. We don't have a developer involved at this point, but it's really more that this property has been in our family for 130 years. It's a century farm. My father still lives on the property, and it's a very big part of who we are. So believe me when I tell you we're invested in this and what that legacy looks like and how we want to leave it for future generations. So at that, Greg, thank you.
Thank you, David. My name is Greg Gamble. We are the land planners and landscape architects, so consulting with the Shorts. If you can't hear me for some reason, let me know. I'll speak louder. There are many times where I have felt as though I needed this kind of protection at the Planning Commission and Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and so thank you. Finally, we have it here in place now. But I'd like to start with looking at the design concepts for Envision Franklin today. So this entire area of the West Basin is in conservation subdivision. We approached the board and mayor and aldermen last October to talk with them about another piece of property and discovered that a collector road was previously or currently proposed through a portion of the Gentry Farms. There were also areas of future sewer lines going through areas of the Gentry Farms. Since October, the Shorts have been instrumental in meeting with their neighbors, meeting with the Gentrys, meeting with Livingfield Moore's representatives, meeting with Brother Campbell and several of the other property owners that are around this area to talk about what their future vision of the West Harpeth Basin is. There were many property owners who requested a significant reduction in density. When Envision Franklin was drafted, there was an assumed density for this area, around 5,000 homes. A lot of the property owners said that's really more than what we had anticipated. So for the Harding Ventures property, they are proceeding forward with a plan of about one house for every 10 acres. The Gentrys have said, we don't have plans for development today, but we'll stay with what the county-based zone is, which is one house for every 5 acres. And so in the quantity of property that's out here, there's probably a reduction of around 300 homes, 3,000 homes total, with documentation of what these landowners would potentially like to see in the future. So the Shorts property is shown on this map as M, N, and O. So it's the properties located directly right on the corner of Mac Hatcher and New Highway 96. Highlighted here on this exhibit. You'll notice directly across the street, across New Highway 96 is West Haven. The area there shown in purple is a area identified in Envision Franklin as neighborhood mixed use. The yellow area that's shown, which is kind of the next band out from the neighborhood mixed use in West Haven, is mixed residential. So as we've been looking at a master plan for the Shorts property, we said, what a unique opportunity to consider an Envision Franklin plan amendment to create a very, very special place, and I'm going to walk you through that tonight. As a part of our consulting team, the Shorts have hired Farmer D. Farmer D is also a landscape architect, and it's really great when landscape architects can come together and look at master planning. But Farmer D's background is in farming. He is the farmer for Serenbe out of Atlanta. And he is also working with a couple of other property owners here in Middle Tennessee, specifically in Williamson County, on plans for their property. Farmer D has a real quick minute and a half background that he'd like to talk with you about, so I'm going to share that now. Just click on the name. Sorry, it's the internet service, maybe. Download speed. I do.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to join virtually this evening. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person. I'm very excited to share a little bit about my role in this wonderful project. My name is Darren Jaffe, Farmer D. And for the last 25 years, I've been really committed to community agriculture and designing and building communities around farms, what are commonly been referred to as agri-hoods today. I did help publish the report with the Urban Land Institute called Agri-Hoods, Cultivating Best Practices, looking at models of agri-hood communities across the country. I currently reside at a community called Serenbe outside of Atlanta, where I started the farm here 20 years ago. And one of the things that I find so exciting about this particular project with the Short family at Westbrook is that it is a fourth generation farm. And the vision is really being led by the family of many generations within the family who had a wonderful upbringing on this beautiful property, a working farm, and really are passionate about preserving that heritage of agriculture and being able to share the experiences that they had growing up on a working farm with the future residents here and with the broader community of West Haven and Franklin in general. And so we came on board, my team, to help really think through how best to preserve the natural areas, the agricultural areas, and design the project with the Gamble Design Group to best optimize the preservation and conservation opportunities of the site. And then develop more of a village, an agrarian village environment that is nested and connected to the natural areas and to the farm. And my background is mostly in the farming side of it. And so, what we've been working closely with the family on and studying the land is looking at how best to utilize and potentially restore some of the historic buildings on the site, utilize them for the farm operation. We are preserving about 50% of the property for agriculture and open space. This will allow a significant opportunity for a working farm to feed the community there, as well as the broader community, and provide educational opportunities, experiential opportunities for residents and the community at large to connect to the farm, learn about the history of the farm and farming in the area, and create wonderful products and experiences from the farm that the community can enjoy. And so, we've really looked closely at this site and how best to really work with all the development pressure and all the roads and growth that's happening around this quaint, beautiful farm site to preserve those gems that are there and activate them, and have the farm really develop in a way that feeds the community. And preserves the rural character of the site. And so we've been, working with the family really closely, and we're really excited about some of the vision that we're able to share with you today. I believe this is a one of the projects that we could be really proud of as a model for the country. You see where development pressure in a place like this really pushes agriculture out, and I think agriculture is a really important and aspect of this area. And so one of the opportunities with a development project like this is that the development actually enables the kind of farming that is about community and about growing healthy food for the community to happen. And so, we're envisioning a real working farm that not only produces fresh food for the residents of the broader community and those in need, but also as a historic farm with educational programs and opportunities for farmers and artisans to be able to create products right there from the land that can be sold in some small artisan shops. Food products that can be value added into meals, into jams and jellies and sauces. There's a tremendous amount of potential with the amount of farmland and the scale of the farm to both produce fresh produce, animal products, and value-added products for the community. So we really hope that this will open up opportunities for agrarian enterprises, and we envision a hospitality component. People can come and experience the farm, staying in a farm-based venue. And we're really looking forward to working with the Planning Commission and the city and the community to help bring this wonderful project to fruition. Thank you for the opportunity to share. Happy to answer any questions.
So I'll move quickly through this presentation, just a few more minutes. But this is proposed as an agri-hood neighborhood, which means that agriculture is not just a part of the neighborhood, it's actually a part of the culture of the community. We have a master plan that we've been working on that illustrates here a collection of residential homes, a farm stay area, agriculture, as well as a village core. This is the amount of green space that we're showing on about 199 acres. It's significant. The green space areas that we have set aside, as mentioned, will have agriculture as a part of that. And so the agriculture that we're talking about integrated in here will include vegetable gardens. It will include pasture lands. It will include nut orchards. It will include community garden areas, U-pick areas that are all integrated within the overall community. There's also an area that today is the historic farm, and it's shown in the bottom right corner, closest to the intersection of Mac Hatcher and New Highway 96. This will be the kind of the center for the farm. We'd like to restore as much of the existing buildings as we can. We want to keep the silo as a kind of an icon of the historic farm and really integrate that into the neighborhood. The historic farm will also be an area for day camps for children, for education, for classes that you and I might go and attend to learn a little bit more about canning food. So there are a lot of really exciting opportunities and community aspects as it relates to the historic farm. What we are asking for tonight is your consideration of letting us establish a village core. This would be the neighborhood mixed-use component. You can see through this plan our intentionality of having smaller scale buildings than what's across the street at West Haven. But to have a smaller main street. This would be a main street that would have artisan shops, that would have artist studios, that would have some neighborhood commercial retail that might be a sundries or a farmer's market, general store. Potential to have a daycare here would be excellent. And it's really about capturing that part of the neighborhood that is kind of the makers of the neighborhood, the makers in the community. To have the opportunity to have a shop here that really focuses on bees, honey, selling goods that are made out of beeswax, and being able to express how our needs and services can be met here on the property. Just on the left here, then you'll see on the left side of the road, the west side of the road, a smaller little village. That's the farm stay. In that location, we'd like to propose a small inn that may have 10 to 12 suites, and then individual cottages around for overnight stay. So in the bottom left corner here where it says farm-based hospitality, that's a picture of a house that you can rent for a weekend in Leapers Fork, but we feel that that's the scale. So to think of what we're proposing is a little bit like West Haven meets Leapers Fork. We're kind of somewhere in the middle. We want to be that smaller scale neighborhood. We want to be that culture, but we want to have that integrated agriculture with a residential and community as well. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Greg. So we'll go through the roll in order. Commissioner Allen, do you have any questions or comments at
So
this?
what's the proposed overall density for this project? I missed that.
Yeah, we don't have a density right now. We're not working through those components at the moment. What we're looking at is having a village core area that would have a mixture of commercial and residential. If you approve this, we'll come back and present our development plan to you, full with densities and proposed architecture.
Okay. Commissioner Franks?
I think the plan's wonderful, Greg, and I know you've put a lot of effort into it. There's a lot of intensity there with that corridor, with Matt Catcher and with Highway 96, and it's obviously it's appropriate for the village and for the green space that complements the village in addition to the single family that's to the north. So it's the shorts have been burdened by tremendous amount of traffic that will eventually come off of Matt Catcher as well as 96, current traffic there. So, if anything, it's a compliment to West Haven, but it's layered back very well, and I think you've done a great job of that. It's first I've seen this plan.
Thank you. And we are showing on this the 300-foot setback off of New Highway 96 and the 150-foot setback off of Matt Catcher. So there are significant buffers that are being shown within this area.
So Commissioner Lindsay, if I could,
Sure.
again, if I'm coming back around to my question then. So therefore, I guess my question would be, well, I'll wait to staff, because that would not be a question for you. Sorry about that. I have a question of
And
staff. when
I
we
did
get
forget
staff.
to say something, Jimmy, that you made me think of. We are currently working with staff on special considerations that may consist of several paragraphs that really outline the proposal in text form that you would be adopting and considering as a part of this Envision Franklin request. So when we're at the Planning Commission, I'll walk you through that in more detail.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Harrison?
I don't have any comments at this time.
I've a couple of quick things. I've been to Serenbe, and it's a phenomenal place there in Atlanta, and the concept of doing something similar to that here in Franklin, especially in this area where we preserve that whole agricultural component to create a development that in an agri-hood type of approach, I think is a phenomenal idea. One quick thought, every time I hear the words multifamily residential, I wonder about scale, because scale, quite honestly, in past projects has scared me to death. So just be cognizant of the fact that we're still dealing with an agri-hood and not a massive, multi-story, whatever you want to call it. So
I think I'll elaborate on that just a little bit. In conservation subdivision, you're allowed to have buildings that have up to 4 homes in one building, so that would be our multiplex building. We are asking that some of the homes that are within the village core area be multifamily, meaning more than 4 homes per building, so that we can have some elevators in those. We want this neighborhood to be multi-generational, and we have a lot of aging adults that just want low maintenance, but still want to be able to have that elevator. And so we may have 6 to 8 units within a building. So that would exceed that 4 units per building in a multiplex.
okay, thank you. Commissioner McLemore?
I love what I see so far, the opportunity to have so many elements in one place, and to be able to maintain an agricultural element. I think it's great. We don't have anything like this in Franklin. And to be able to pull this off would be amazing.
Commissioner Mann?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I think the idea is very cool. I had not seen something like this. My concern is similar to Commissioner Lindsay's, and just maybe the density and the size of some of the buildings. I'm kind of thinking West Haven, if you plop the farm concept in the middle of West Haven, I think it would look off. But I think that having the buildings designed properly around the farm I think it's a very cool idea.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Orr?
No additional comments or
Okay,
questions.
thank you. Alderman Peterson?
No questions at this time.
Okay, and Alderman Williamson?
I just would like to say I really love the concept. And I do see that the village aspect could be very integral to the use and function of this. And yeah, I think probably my only concern would be, just in part of the massing of the multifamily, how big at a scale is that? And then, kind of how that's broken down density. Just density, just the general terms of that being in here. But I really like what I'm seeing.
We'll continue to work with staff as we look at these special considerations for this particular area. Maybe Andrea and I can work on some language that starts to address kind of multifamily and the intention
Right.
behind that. Yeah.
Great, thank
So,
you.
I guess-
Alderman Berger?
Oh, yeah, I'm just giving you a note.
Could you use your microphone?
Yeah, I'm gonna say, let me punch that on. Yes, thanks. I really like this a lot. What Roger said, I would just echo that because Airbnb is an incredible development. To have something like that here in Franklin would be very unique. And I love how you marry that agriculture atmosphere to development. I would also be very cognizant of the mass and scale and the size, the height. I don't know what height limits you are allowed here, but I would be very careful of that, especially with what you're trying to incorporate here to really save and extend this farm-like atmosphere and actual working farm here too. So I don't see some height, okay, but it has to be really limited. Mass and scale and how that fits into development. And the other thing I really liked about this whole thing was that farm stay, bringing people into experience agriculture. We're losing a lot of that. We're losing that with our students. We're losing that with our young people. And I think bringing that kind of thing in where people can actually stay in a farm stay, experience that, I can sort of feel what you're going to look at in that kind of instance if you look at Serenbe. So thanks.
Thank you. Alderman McClendon, Alderman Speedy. Alderman Martin?
I think it's a wonderful idea. I think the concept is great. I think leaving the farm on the highway that we're all used to seeing is very comforting. And I'm delighted that they have come up with this design.
Thank you, Margaret. Alderman Barnhill?
I like what I've seen so far, and again, it's something unique, something different for the community, and it gives a lot of people an opportunity who have not grown up on a farm and hauled a little hay and milked a few cows and whatnot. But I have, so I'm not necessarily enamored with that, because that was a lot of hard work. But a lot of people have never seen that. So for that opportunity to see that and experience some of that, I think would be great for the community.
Maybe you could give a demonstration right now.
Put a cow out there.
We had two requests at our neighborhood meeting. One was to make way for golf carts, and the second was to find something for the high school students to do. So we'll put them to work.
As long as you bale square bales of hay, you'd be all right.
That's right.
There you go. Alderman Blanton, not here yet. Alderman Shore?
I have no comment.
No comments. Mayor Moore?
Yeah, well, I applaud the Short family for having this vision to work with designers and create something very unique. And I really like the concept. I think there's some issues that have been raised that we all have concern with about the massing and proportions and so on, but I think this could be very exciting for Franklin.
Great. Any final comments?
Well, I guess, Commissioner?
Yes, I'm sorry.
My question actually was going to be of staff, and the staff has not said a word. I thought they had some comments to make.
Here he comes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a brief comment. This is it's a unique project. It's a unique vision. We don't have anything like it in Franklin. It doesn't fit neatly into any of the Envision Franklin design concept boxes. So we're working with Greg and his team on 2 special considerations. They'll be fairly lengthy. We've asked that he articulate the vision and write out the vision so that is memorialized in Envision Franklin. And we're working on that. The transportation aspect didn't come up. It is at the intersection of 2 arterials. There could be some traffic impacts. We'll work through those if and when it gets to the development plan rezoning phase. But on the other hand, it's also an opportunity to improve the street network in this area and improve bike ped mobility in this area as well. So,
Great.
Thank you.
So now I have a comment.
Okay.
Because my comment for this is, I want to see staff drive this. I don't want the developer to drive this because staff was involved in us with this conservation. And you guys know my concerns about us every time someone comes in and asks us to amend our vision. I want us to drive the vision for this. And I do commend the Short family for this because I've never seen anything this unique. And our gateways, we talked about this when we started out on Franklin Road with all that development and all of that. We do need to preserve our gateways into Franklin, which this will be that. Never seen anything like this, but I just want to make sure that we are driving this
Right.
and not someone else. And my other question was, what would be the difference between, because there was there's no thought yet of the amount of density for that, was what was going to be the difference between conservation and what they're proposing, because this kind of fits into conservation. And I think the density probably and the scale and all that will be the difference. I just want to make sure that, and I hear that from Mr. Gamble and everyone, that they will be working closely with staff, because that's the only way I'm going to buy into this, is that we closely control this. So that the next person that asks us, it comes on, because it's coming, the very next person out here is going to ask us to go away from conservation. I want them to know they better come correct on it, just like they're coming correct on this, with us preserving the gateway into Franklin. Just thank
Right.
you. I just want to make sure that was said.
Great points, Marcia.
I would just say to Marcia and to everybody from that comment, that the people driving the vision here is the fellow we saw up here who's done this in Cerebee, who really should drive the vision. And and we've never done anything like this, but so it doesn't really fit. And I think, but I hear what you're saying, Marcia. I think that we do work closely with them, but everything they presented here is conservation. It is preserving a farm, these generations of 4 generations. That's their whole deal, I think, from what I've heard, if it's correct, that they want to preserve this land and they want to make it something very special. So I think we're going to have to, I think all of us are going to have to think outside the box a little bit, because we have never seen anything like this in Franklin. I think it's very unique. I think it was something that would be amazing in that area. I wish I had that on the east side of Franklin as well. So we want to do number 2 over there, Greg. Find somebody, because I think something like this is very unique, and I think it'd be great. But
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may, we have been working with the consultant and the applicant on the language. So, we want to get to a point where we're comfortable with supporting their vision and supporting the amendment request. So that is going on.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Okay. We've got a substantial item still to take on, then, so we need to get started with that. Item number 2 is the presentation on the new City Hall Master Planning Joint Conceptual Workshop Input Session. So our target is to wrap up at 6:30, so let's keep that in mind as we proceed through the process. Yes, Vernon?
Not quite. I'll explain. Good evening, planning commissioners and aldermen. I thought I'd like to introduce our consultant, but also give a quick overview of where we are at in this initial planning stage for the new City Hall. When we approached the Board of Mayor and Aldermen late last year during a pandemic, they were very intentional to chip away at this project because we didn't know at the time what the impact of the pandemic would be. So we're in this initial phase of several phases of community engagement and visioning. So the presentation tonight and those that have happened in the last several months with staff, with citizens, special interest groups, have been to seek their input, their vision, what they like, what they may not like about the new City Hall and redeveloping this site, so that later this year we can come back to you all with a master concept plan of how this site will look, as far as mass and scale, amenities, how it faces or shapes the square, or complete the square, which has been our tagline. So we've secured the services of Studio 8 Design, OHM Consultants, and earlier this week, Tuesday, Matt Taylor, who's going to come up and give you an overview and seek your input over the next 45 minutes or so, shared a similar presentation with the aldermen. But it is similar. So if hopefully the aldermen will stay and participate further, but we did make some changes to try to make sure we're getting the input you need so we can continue to proceed with this master concept plan for the square. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt, and I'd ask you to, again, share your vision, your thoughts, dream a little, and because their job, our role, is to put it all together from the citizens, the staff, and of course yourselves who will be making decisions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vernon.
I feel like there's a little pressure there after Tuesday night. But thank you all for taking the time tonight to let us come talk to you about this project. I want to reiterate a bit of what Vernon said in that this is, we're in the first phase of two community engagement processes relative to Franklin City Hall. We don't even start designing the building until next year. We've been talking with staff, lots of detailed meetings with each department about their needs, the space they work in, what will help them do their jobs more efficiently and productively, how to break down some of the walls that exist between people in this building, and we're looking forward to a new 50 to 100-year building on this site in one of the most prestigious locations of downtown Franklin. So this process is about getting everybody's input. We're not recommending things yet. We're in a listening mode. We've brought together some examples of things that have been done in other places and things that have been suggested to us so far. And we really want to get your feedback throughout this process about things that you like, don't like. You may want to see things that we may not have talked about or thought about yet. And all of that will become the program for what we start to incorporate into the master plan as we go forward. So, and again, master plan is following this. We'll come back before the board in a second round of community engagement later this fall. So with that, I would like to introduce also from our team, Anna Ruth Kimbrough, my partner at Studio 8 Design and helping to manage the project. Matt Edwards and John Calhoun are with OHM Advisors. They're another architecture firm that we have partnered up with on this project to bring lots of good expertise and talent to the job. We have a list of consultants to help analyze and study all the different aspects of technology and structure and office space and civic construction that you can see on the cover sheet there. Let's see. So topics for discussion tonight, we're going to talk about the existing site, We're going to talk about historic context. We're going to talk a little bit about site context, architectural style, City Hall operations, the role of City Hall in the community, community amenities, and supporting uses. Questions that we would like to put out for consideration from you all are: what type of architecture would you like to see? What goals are paramount to the successful design of a new Franklin City Hall building? What role should a city hall play in the community? And what supporting uses or public amenities would you like to see incorporated on the City Hall block? I believe you're all familiar with the site since we're here in City Hall tonight. The Second Avenue parking garage will remain. We front on the square in Third Avenue prominently. The Pull-Tight Theater and the greenhouse on the southeast corner are historic structures that will be protected and preserved, and any new design will take that into account in how we deal with that. Historically, this site is or this particular quadrant of the square is somewhat unique, where the other three corners have been largely consistent over time. There have been different businesses and different buildings on this block. There were once grocery stores, blacksmith shops, places for people to meet and gather. You see the D.T. Crockett grocery store, Wagner Laundry Building. There was a public garden on 2nd Avenue where the parking garage sits now. We have anecdotal stories about a water trough once being located right at the corner of 3rd Avenue as it enters the square there. We haven't been able to completely back that up, but we're exploring that further. It is somewhat supported by the livery stables that you see in the bottom right corner of this picture, which is a much more urban type structure than when you tend to think of stables as being more of a barn, since this was downtown. And there were two other stables up on Main Street on both the north and south sides with some similar architectural expression to them. The Pie Wagon was once located by the courthouse until it moved to the northwest corner of the square and was another community place where people from all over town came to buy the Chapman's pies. This was the gateway and kind of the crossroads where people brought their, came in by horse and buggy, parked in the stables, and then met people on the corner as they went to the grocery store and explored the other businesses on Main Street. Excuse me, relative to the public square, the original City Hall was located across the square on the northeast corner. That building is still standing now. You can see the city offices sign over the door there, and the arched entry where the fire truck used to park. The courthouse is obviously a very strong presence, and our one real piece of civic architecture on Main Street and the square. There are the definition, the square has really been defined geometrically on all four sides, and we think that geometry is probably important as you look down at the aerial photo. And then got buildings like 306 Public Square that reintroduced some of the arches that we'll talk about a little bit later that were particularly evident in the stables buildings, and that's sort of an expression that's been lost. Some of these have been adapted or incorporated, like you see at Mellow Mushroom and down at Binks, where it's more of an entry with an arched transom now, where that arch has been infilled. Architectural style, historically, you can see how those arches were a big part of the fabric of downtown and still continue to be with some of these remaining buildings. You can see the historic building, or photo of 306 Public Square in the middle at the bottom. Arched openings and punched windows are very common up and down Main Street rather than big expanses of glass. We have a base middle top, which is part of our design guidelines through most of the architecture in the historic downtown context, especially along Main Street. And you see those, the other livery stables that were on Main Street with the double arches, that was a bit of a larger stable entry that had both of those. We thought it was particularly interesting that that building type, obviously the function is gone, but the architectural expression of these to be more of an urban stable with those arch components that brought in the stepped parapets and the brick detailing that you see at the top. And then how it's reminiscent in some of these other buildings might be a detail to kind of reach back and tell some of the story of downtown Franklin. As we look at materials and detailing, obviously we have a lot of brick predominantly downtown. Stone is used as an accent on the parapets and windowsills and window heads in a lot of cases. We have porches and canopies in certain locations that help to bring the scale of some of the taller buildings down to the human pedestrian scale of the sidewalk. You see wood storefronts at the sidewalk level to open up where more of the retail businesses were, and as opposed to the residences and offices that existed above. There's different detailing in the tops of the buildings. While we feel like we have a very consistent character downtown, we have a lot of different architectural expressions and styles, from how the roofs and dormers, roofs and dormers work, the parapets step in different formations, and then how the brick detailing, sometimes even with all brick, as you see in the middle at the bottom there, still creates a lot of depth in the elevations and brings a lot of scale and character rather than flat walls like you happen to see in the current City Hall Mall building. So these are a couple of examples of different architectural styles that we wanted to discuss with you all and get your feedback on. The Alexandria, Virginia City Hall is a historic structure. It's located on a large plaza. Has a fountain in the front, and so it's stepped back from that street edge and much more open as an outdoor gathering space. The Mount Pleasant South Carolina City Hall is a new city hall, and one of the things we've discovered, especially in smaller historic towns, is they don't build new city halls very often there. So as we look for examples and case studies for what a new city hall might be, we look to some of the older buildings and then see what we can learn from new ones to take advantage of. And then ultimately, we're going to have to bring all of that together to create a unique city hall for our community in our special site here. The Mount Pleasant City Hall is a little more contemporary than I think anyone would envision. It's also a more suburban development with surface parking lots around it, but it does have certain elements that speak to the sustainability goals that we're going to have for this building as a LEED Silver building. It has an exterior porch expression at the one end for outdoor gathering outside of their council chambers, and it has some of the vertical rhythm that recalls the Mount Pleasant Historic Village. We've also talked about classical architecture and whether or not that's appropriate since we are creating a civic building. We have most of the buildings on Main Street are retail business with a little bit of residential on some of the upper floors. The courthouse is really the only civic building that we have. And so what does it mean to be civic? How does that express itself? When you look at the courthouse, you see the portico and the columns and the pediment on the front. It has a certain presence on the square that's different than the other buildings downtown. We don't want to compete with the courthouse, but we do want to recognize that we are building a city hall, and now the south side of the square will flank Third Avenue with the two seats of government between city and county. The two examples at the bottom are examples of new buildings built in smaller, largely historic context towns. In Birmingham, Michigan, the Draxton Hotel was built just recently, and we saw some details in that recalled the potential redevelopment of our site, where you look at the base of the building there, you could see that potentially lining Third Avenue to create a long pedestrian-friendly streetscape and hold the edge of the building right along Third Avenue, where then as you step above to the upper floors, the massing steps back and breaks, creates some rooftop courtyards, steps again at the roof. so that we don't create just a big block building that overwhelms the site and changes the character and massing along the way. In a similar fashion, in Montclair, New Jersey, this development anchored the corner. The building still has a very strong base, middle, and top. It has traditional brick and stone detailing, but they use the reveals in the building, as you see, as you set back from the corner in each direction, to anchor that corner almost as a smaller footprint building, even though it's part of a larger development. The rooftop steps back again, but we still have the punched window openings in both of these examples. We have the mixture of more traditional materials with stone and brick, and a very strong pedestrian base in both applications. So we thought those might be applicable to our project. And with that, I believe I'm at my first stopping point to open this up for comments and feedback and direction from you all. I do want to note, because we had a little bit of this conversation the other night, in the photos we're showing, we're just looking for examples of concepts to share with you all. We're not sharing photos of what we are proposing for Franklin City Hall. That will come with design once we start that process next year. Right now, we're in a master planning mode to figure out how big is this building? How does it sit on the site? Do we have any sort of plaza in the front? Do we anchor the corner? How do we break down the massing? We step from the square, which is our most dense, prominent edge of the site, all the way back to Church Street, which is much more residential, and the density breaks down. So we want to recognize that once we determine how big the building needs to be. A lot of that will come from the functions that we want to include, which are certainly staff office space, customer-facing spaces, which we'll talk about, and meeting spaces. So, we really want your feedback on some of the architecture and the history and how that might be incorporated, and what you think is worthy of pursuing, things that you think might not be appropriate. You're not going to hurt our feelings. We're looking for the good, the bad, and the indifferent tonight. So with that, I'll stop talking and ask for you all to provide some feedback to us.
Okay. Commissioner Allen, do you have some comments?
No comments as of now.
Okay. Commissioner Franks?
It's going to be a great challenge to satisfy everybody.
I think that might be the understatement for the evening.
Harper Square took a while, and you can see how pretty it turned out, and the functionality of it. But I think you're doing it right on point. Great job.
Commissioner Harrison?
I'll just echo Mr. Franks. You stepped on a great challenge here, and looking forward to see how it develops and grows.
Thanks.
I agree. I like the approach I've seen so far, that picking up some of these architectural components, the arches, and I don't think an arch becomes an overwhelming part of this building, but the feature of that look on the building certainly probably has a place. Brick, the stone parapets, whatever. Obviously, we've got experience in doing some buildings, the building next door, a brand new building on the square that looks 100 years old, the Harper Square project. So they're good examples of things we've done, and I think have done well. A thought I haven't heard maybe expressed yet, we've relied on the area in front on the square. As we front on the square, that's typically the location of a performing stage.
Yes, sir.
There needs to be room to, if that's the will of the city, to accommodate that going forward, because it's probably really the only place around the square where you can do some of that and still have the kinds of jazz festivals and things that we're used to having on the 4th. But otherwise, I like a lot of the concepts. It does need to fit with a square and look like it belongs here. So those are my thoughts.
Great, thank you. I really didn't talk about the plaza that much until we got to the Alexandria, but that has been a discussion point of do we keep the entrance to City Hall on the square as it was once historically? We have multiple doors around the building now, but there should be a prominent entrance for how you arrive at City Hall and which way that should face. What's appropriate there? Do we want to hold the building edge up at the face of the courthouse to keep the geometry of the square? Or because this is the quadrant that does host some of those performance aspects, do we want to create a little bit of a civic plaza to allow some more space and treat that a little bit differently there. And there's no right or wrong about that, but that is something we really do want feedback on because
Right.
it's something that has been discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner McLemore?
I'd like to see it fit in with the existing architectural elements and definitely not contemporary. I would not see anything contemporary.
No, trust
And
me,
something-
we're very aware and sensitive to that. That's why I bring up the point about some of the concepts and not necessarily thinking that this is the design that we're proposing.
And something that looks like it's been there a long time and it would be timeless for a long time. That's all.
Thanks.
Commissioner Mann?
Yeah, thanks. I've had the opportunity to see this and talk multiple times now, which has been great. New things come to mind every time, and I was fortunate enough to do a walk around the building. I think it was on Monday evening. And a couple of things stood out that I've already provided feedback, but I do think having some sort of pavilion on the front with an entrance there is important. I think we just need to be cautious of how big we make that, because the ones that I've seen are really big are in much larger cities, and we want to make sure that we're welcoming as a small town, particularly in our downtown area. I think I've already provided most of my comments, but one thing I noticed when you presented to BOMA on Tuesday night, I forget which alderman said it, but they said they had concerns about the security and it being too tight.
Right.
And that resonated very well with me. I think that, I certainly want staff to feel comfortable. That's paramount. But I've been in buildings where you're swiping to go through every door. And that is a little burdensome. So I want to make sure we put thought into where we have gatherings. It truly is welcoming. I think we live in a safe town. Might not always be the case, but I certainly don't want to make it feel like it's a locked down building. I think it was very well said, and that was a point that I just wanted to make. So,
Right.
Thank you.
Commissioner Orr?
I was happy to hear you say that you weren't proposing any of the architecture in the case studies, because I like none of those. Too new, too square, just that won't fit us. I liked everything that you showed of what we have downtown now with the arches and lots of nice architecture and different decorative pieces on the buildings. I think we need to maintain the actual square. Don't step the new building up or back. Keep it the same visual from above.
Okay.
Probably your matched building heights. So it can look a little different, but it doesn't need to stand out as in, wow, look at me. It should fit in. And then depending on what you do or what space we need for staff going down 3rd Avenue, maybe step it down a story so it matches on what's there.
Sure.
And break that building length up. And it may even look like different buildings, but they're all still connected as you break it up. And I think it would fit in nicely.
Great. Thank you.
Right. Alderman Peterson?
So much of what's already been said, I think, is important, and I also agree that it needs to fit with what we have now, but we do need to make sure that we have plenty of office space. I mean, that is one of the things that's tremendously important, and as we're saying that we're going to have something that will last for many, many years, think about how much Franklin has grown in the last few decades and everything. You need to be prepared to, have some availability that can be expanded. But again, looking at a lot of things that are already here, I think, is important. And it'll be interesting to see what is being proposed.
I'm going to bring this plexiglass back with me.
Commissioner Williamson?
I have a lot of notes, but I'll try to
Great.
be very concise.
We want all the feedback you're willing to share.
Okay. I think definitely keeping in the historic character is very important. With that said, I've seen it starting to happen here in Franklin, even in the historic area, where you can have a very more traditional, historic type looking building that might be new, but not to say that the interiors have to be that too. So it can definitely take on more contemporary thing. It's nice, light, and airy. I think the classical architecture, you know, you start to see it kind of more of the civic. The scale of that in that square would definitely be a consideration. But then I know when you start to look at classical styles, they'll always have like the original and then there's a revival. And so, but the interesting thing about the revivals is a lot of times they're taking all the new ideas that they have developed since then and still fitting it with a motif. So like, you know, when I think of this, well, it's going to have to be like a classical revival, you know, iteration in. And I think there's, especially in architecture and design, there's been a lot of progress about understanding how buildings work for the people that are using them, and also how to welcome the outside in. And so that's been probably some major progress, especially since probably the 80s, that's come along. So that'd be great to see some of those new ideas incorporated in there. Yeah, the prominence on the square. I think of this as how this is going to function for the community. We know it has to have those basic functions. It has to have office. It has to provide the functions of the city and the real estate that we need it to. But I think when I think about what is the role of a city hall in the community, it supports a wonderful community, and we're very diverse here. And so then, you know, I think putting it on the square is really opening it up more, because it's a very public place. A lot of local people will go there, a lot of visitors, and we want to really kind of show that, you know, this is us, this is Franklin, and, you know, here's the way you can interface with the city. But then you think of, well, how do you create that? Like in particular, like a case study you might want to look at is Orlando City Hall. And there, when you walk in, part of it is very locked down. I mean, you walk in, you have to put your bag through x-rays. So it does have that higher security level. But the great thing about it is it comes in off of kind of a public square. They have a lot of, like the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center. So there's a lot of stuff happening around it, which I think our square in a much smaller scale does.
Sure.
But the engagement that really draws in just the random passerby is they have things that the public that don't have to go in to pay a water bill can interface with. And in their particular case, they do a gallery, one that's a little bit more permanent and one that cycles out more. And so then I think of, well, how do we activate that gallery? Because however you activate that, that's who will be coming in to look at it. So I thought of, well, local school children, even expos about the agricultural industry. I think sometimes that does get left out about the identity of Franklin, because we're growing so much. Local artists, and yeah, and then also just even basic information about what the city services are offered. I've been quite surprised since I've lived here is a lot of people have no clue what the city services are besides trash pickup, because I know legally they can't dump trash places. And like, okay, if you have to pay or take it to the dump. And, you know, I've had conversations with a lot of people in my local community, just informing them, and they're like, hey, I'm gonna put a driveway, and it's like, well, you might wanna check out their zoning codes, and they have no clue, and they're just gonna, you know. So I think, you know, that's a real opportunity to educate it and putting it in a form that it's like, oh, wow, you know, Franklin has composting. I can get those bags, and, you know, if I don't want to dump it in a landfill, they're going to compost it for me. Most people think they don't know where that goes. It disappears.
Right.
So I think that's a really excellent opportunity. And talking about kind of, you know, different things of historical oaths, shall we say. I know there's a lot of different historical buildings in downtown Franklin with various uses. Just so the things that you had presented tonight, the one that always, you know, was like, oh, that's interesting, is the livery. Because, you know, right around the time the vehicle was made, those got shut down really fast. And so besides, if you happen to catch it in a historic image book, you know, if you ask an 8-year-old what that might be, they have no clue. That you didn't think that it's not like the Wild West where you tie your horse in front of the thing and go in. So you know, kind of the different varied historical uses that were very critical to Franklin and our development.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, lots of great feedback.
Great. Alderman Berger, have you got something you can say in 15
Real quick.
seconds or less?
First, I said last Tuesday, I said, where's Ben Franklin? Where's Benjamin? We ignore our founder of our city, so I'd like to see him prominent somewhere in this place. Entrance definitely off the square, in my opinion. Multiple entrances are needed. We need to serve not only the people that work here, but the public. Civic Plaza out front, I definitely want to see us keep that because that is critical to a lot of the functions that we have downtown. I believe the outside should definitely look timeless and classical, but it should not inside look old. I think I think we have to remember that we're building City Hall not for us and right now. We're building it for tomorrow and the future. And we doesn't hurt to look a little modern, and we can still encompass a lot of those historic features in the building as well. I'm very concerned with, meeting spaces inside and everything. Going down Third Avenue, I think you mentioned something about maybe stepping down maybe I think Michael said that. I think in the square, and when you come down Third Avenue, it should look the same, but halfway down Third Avenue, they could step it down maybe and give it a different facade on the sides to blend in with our community on Third Avenue. Classical and timeless. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman Martin?
I think I've said it all.
Okay. Thank you. Alderman Barnhill?
I may have said it all, but I don't mind repeating some of it. I think Commissioner Franks hit it right on a nail on the head right there, because what we have to understand, we are not going to build a building that satisfies everyone. So with that understood, what we have to do is figure out what we need. Now, I haven't heard what we need yet, and I haven't heard the office space needed. I haven't heard the input from the department heads. I haven't heard any questions or answers on the parking spaces that are needed for this right here. I haven't heard where we're going to put another 30 or 40,000 people in Franklin in the next 10 or 15 years if we wanted to come to this location. I haven't heard any of that. I think we need to be looking at that. I mean, the design has to be wrapped around that. And for me, having lived in Franklin all my life, I don't really see anything in the buildings that jump out at me that remind me of something historical on the square. Okay, it doesn't do it. But I think we have to know the numbers, and we don't have those yet. And I think we need to have those. Do you know what is the acreage or the square footage here?
I believe the existing facility is about 88,000 square feet.
88,000 square feet. And I'm going to say one more thing just to throw it out. Several years ago, we had an opportunity to have a public-private partnership on City Hall. Those plans are still there. I don't know why we wouldn't pursue some of that. Just take a look at it, see what happens. I mean, we've got, there's no telling what this building will cost the way it's set up now, the way we're being presented to us now. There's $24 million in the budget. That was the budgeted item. When we did the capital expenditure budgets, that's when the aldermen sat down and the mayor, and we have X amount of money to spend. We have $328 million to spend on $600 million worth of capital improvement projects. That building has to come in somewhere in that neighborhood. Now, we could get out and put out a bubbly fountain over on this corner and something else over on this corner over here, and a garden over here. But we're not going to have the money to do that unless you skew that 10-year capital improvements plan. So I want to hear what the department heads have to say in the space that they need, and the amount of what we have to have. It should be City Hall. And I told Ann Peterson the other night, I thought about it should be City Hall. It should not be the Taj Mahal. Okay, and let's get to that. Then you work on the beautiful interior and the wonderful outside and the bricks where they're to be placed and what color they are. But what we need is a City Hall.
All right. Good points.
Yes.
Alderman Shore?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything, but I've got to say, I agree with Clyde, which I'm starting to do more, and it's starting to worry me, actually. But I think the building's going to be designed however it's going to be designed. I mean, we've already got 17 opinions out here, and bless you for trying to figure all that out. The building, in my opinion, and I've been involved with developing buildings my whole life, almost needs to be developed from the inside out. The functionality of this space is the most critical thing that we could possibly do. We've now been in a building forever that's the least functional building that any of us have ever been in for a city hall. And it needs to be flexible. It needs to be the ability to change as things change. You know, right now the whole mode is to be have open spaces and lots of glass and all that kind of good stuff. So and you know, friendly spaces and shared offices and all those kind of things. That may not be the trend 10 years from now. And so this building has to be very flexible in how we do, you know, things as simple as distribution of air and power and communication stuff and all those kind of things. And then you get that all put together, and then you figure out what the building looks like. I mean, that's how it should be done. And that's exactly what Clyde said. And of course, you know, we all know, I won't bring up the police station. But anyway, I brought that up enough earlier on. But that's kind of how I feel. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Mayor Moore.
I'm going to yield my time to Matt, let him continue on. I think there's been a lot of great comments, and I appreciate everybody's comments.
Absolutely agree. We really appreciate the feedback so far. I do want to touch on, because I don't want it to be misunderstood, that we are not paying attention to what staff needs. We have not presented that yet because we're doing this concurrently, that we're working with staff and the departments while we do the public engagement process, and we're going to bring all of that together, sort of like not just cooking a recipe with part of the ingredients and then adding stuff in later. All of this will inform things, and we're going to go through options and ideas and bring those master plan ideas back to everyone, that we will not design a building that's not functional for staff. That is the core DNA of this. That's not something that the public necessarily needs to comment on, because that does come from the inside out and comes from staff. And we're working very closely with all of the departments and the city leadership on that process. It will be presented together as how it all works together. We don't want to just do one part and design and then ask for these kind of questions tonight and have to go back and redesign because we didn't have that information to start with. And we're already looking at a potential 6-year project if we stay on a pretty fast track. We may have to stop and rethink some things along the way, just in the way this process goes. As you all know, because of your roles and your time that you dedicate to this, we live in a very high-touch, community-involved city. And so it's been important, and part of what was charged to us to start was to engage the public as part of this whole first phase process. So we have the functional programming, the community engagement. We're going to have a wish list. We won't be all things to all people. We will come back and, you know, get that continued feedback and take some of the body blows that everybody throws at us along the way, and we're going to make it right. So I just wanted to reassure you all that we're not ignoring the functional aspect of this in some of these issues that we're talking about. It's a concurrent conversation that's happening, and it will all be presented.
All right. Okay. You have more to present?
I do. Yes, sir. I'll try to skim through, so I'll let you guys do the talking. Relative to City Hall operations, first and foremost, we want to be welcoming and inviting to all visitors. Everybody said that. We've talked about that relative to security and where the entrance is. When you come in, you know where to go. You feel like you're here. It's a friendly place for residents and a friendly place for visitors because of its location in City Hall. We do want to be safe and secure. We want to promote occupant health and well-being, which this building does not particularly do for the staff that work here every day. We want to provide service to the citizens with improved operational efficiencies and enhance that citizen interaction so they know where to go and don't get lost, and whether they need a permit or to pay a bill or just to come talk to somebody about an issue they're having in their neighborhood. Flexibility is going to be the key to this. As Alderman Peterson noted, we're designing this for a long time. The way we work, the number of people that work here, and the way citizens come to visit this building is going to change over that 100 years. And so whether it's security, whether it's computers, whether the size of a desk, how we hold meetings, all of that, we want to keep flexibility in mind so that this building continues to fulfill its role successfully over that time. But it's got to be functional at day one as well. And then we alluded to this a little bit in your comments, that we want to build a state-of-the-art facility that speaks to the level of care of Franklin. We expect a lot of our developers. We expect a lot of the design that comes into our community. And this is the city's opportunity to build a building as well that speaks to that same level of service that they provide their residents, and in the architecture that is going to come out of this. I'm going to stop there and see if y'all have any additional feedback and comments before I move on to the next slide.
Okay, rather than going through an entire roll call, does anybody have comments they'd like to raise relative to operations?
Oh, okay, so you're just covering number 10. Is this the rest of your presentation now, or are you just covering slide number 10? Just
No, I'm
operations,
just
is that it?
covering slide number 10.
Okay.
This is a little bit, we really want it to be more
comments.
conversational format. It's a little
No
hard to do in
comments.
the setting, so
No
I
comments.
apologize.
No.
Okay, anything relative to operations?
I mean, I think I hit all my bullet points in one
Okay.
speech.
Okay. And we can revisit anything that we've talked about, with a later comment as well, so we can keep moving.
Okay.
Speaking to the role of City Hall in the community, we want to provide a place where the community can gather beyond City Hall functions. Want to embrace neighborhood partnerships. We want to, we have discussed the possibility of a museum or exhibit component that might tell some of the story of the agriculture in the past, of what used to be on this site historically, what role the livery stables played, and how this was a crossroads for commerce and people to come together, and continues to be today. It's a place where this is named after Benjamin Franklin. So how do we tell the story of what does he have to do with Franklin, Tennessee? When was he here? What did he do? Is that a statue? Is it an exhibit? That might be what starts to form some of the artwork in the lobby. It might be artwork that happens in open outdoor spaces around the building. But telling some of that history and the stories of the city of Franklin, we think may be important. Whether or not a visitor information center is appropriate for City Hall. Is this the place that we want the visitors to come and learn about what's happening downtown and throughout the rest of Franklin? What is Franklin? What should they visit? Where should they go? Provide an educational component for the community that could be things about composting. It could be about stormwater techniques. Could be history in our downtown fabric, and provide something for all ages because of our location in the downtown core here. Some of the examples that we have here, again, the Mount Pleasant City Hall has exhibits in the wall that sort of tell the story of the village of Mount Pleasant. The Independence Visitor Center in Philadelphia, this is Alderman Martin's favorite photo that looks like an airport. The Buda, Texas City Hall has a large lobby that allows for spillover when there's large meetings. It allows for gatherings to happen under shelter in the roof, under a roof and in the lobby. There's interaction between the office space through the interior glass that you see looking down in the lobby. And the Boston City Hall is, let me reassure everybody, this is not the architectural style that we're proposing for Franklin. It's a brutalist building, and we understand that, but it does have examples of how they've incorporated a coffee shop kiosk for when people do come to meetings, if they're waiting for a BOMA meeting, before and after, to have a more informal conversation about an issue. It has an open staircase that connects the lobby to the office spaces so that you see the people coming and going, and we don't send them off into dark, dank fire stairwells. that kind of thing. So that's really a photo more about concepts of the kinds of things that could liven up the lobby space and not separate those things so much. I was going to stop here. Do you want to keep going and then
Why don't
just
you
share
go
with
to-
comments? Okay. Relative to community amenities, we've talked about outdoor open spaces. One of the ways that we can break the massing of the building up and the long, hard edge along Third Avenue is to step the facade in and out to create some alcoves, potentially create some courtyards, enhance the streetscape. Third Avenue's not gone through its streetscape enhancements yet. Paley Park in New York is an example of a small courtyard in between buildings that has a water feature that helps break down some of the traffic noise and is a pleasant place to wait outside if you're going to meet somebody downtown or meet somebody to come to City Hall. Again, the Butte, Texas City Hall is another example of a new one where you see the citizen services are all located right off the lobby there. And there's seating so that when people come to City Hall, they're getting multiple uses out of the lobby space, not just a big open corridor. They can pay their bills, they can pick up permits, they can ask questions, they can wait for a meeting, they can wait to meet someone else, and there's an open stair that connects the lobby to the upper floors. And then parking is always an issue downtown. We're looking at options between subgrade parking that might go underground beneath the building because we do have a relatively tight site by the time we build a new building that is locked in by the Second Avenue parking garage, which is relatively full. Downtown's growing. We are also looking at above ground parking, like the Fourth Avenue structure and the Second Avenue structure, how those might work together, how they might support City Hall, provide some additional parking for residents and visitors either after hours so that there's some separation with city staff needs and but still available for use. In terms of other supporting uses, some of the suggestions that have been discussed, we've talked about gatherings and events and festivals. I mean, Main Street Festival and Dickens Christmas are two of the biggest that happen downtown and happen right on the front doorstep of the current City Hall. Performances happen there as well. We're looking at gardens, parks, plazas, courtyards that may be part of a rooftop design where the massing of the building steps down and there could be a little bit more of a courtyard green space for the staff to use and be able to get outdoors, but adjacent to the workspace. You can also use that again to break up the massing of the building. Looking at visitor information, public art that can also tell part of the history and story. That's not Benjamin Franklin in the lower left corner, but it could be. Looking at pedestrian connectors, if you envision the walkway from the Second Avenue garage to the square now between the 231 building and City Hall, it's not a particularly inviting space, but there are ways to treat those spaces so that they appear a little bit nicer and encourage more pedestrian circulation downtown, keep it safe and make it friendly and welcoming. And then looking again at streetscape, similar to ideas the way Puckett's uses the sidewalk as part of their functional welcoming space, rooftop areas that can also support office space and create a really positive, healthy workspace for the staff. In terms of looking at the alley between City Hall and the Second Avenue garage, we've had some discussions about how we might be able to redesign that sort of space to make it a little more pedestrian friendly and not just so utilitarian for cars. You can see an example there of the activated alley at the top left. Pocket parks and courtyards that could be green roofs could happen at ground level around the building. Maybe an aspect to treat the southern end of the site where we transition to the residential neighborhood, and then looking at that plaza area, that are there other elements relative to the trees and the hardscape and some grass and things that tend to soften that space and make it friendly as a place to hang out and meet others. And then with that, Vernon mentioned the Complete the Square tagline. There is a website created for the project for people to follow along and see what is happening, when the next meetings are happening, when reports are done and reported back to the city, they will be posted there. There's opportunities to submit comments and questions on the website, so the staff and residents and visitors can all access that and visit it. So with that, I am finished talking and would like to ask for any other thoughts from you all about anything that we've talked about.
I have just a quick comment that I thought of after Clyde spoke about the previous plan that was done. I mean, I think I even still have a copy of it on a laptop. Has that been pulled off the shelves, looked at?
Not yet. We've been more in the mode of doing the meetings and asking the questions for what the current need is, and then we can look at that and see how it might be, whether it's still applicable relative to size and what the needs are now.
Yeah, I mean, as an older plan, as I recall, it had City Hall plus the residential concept.
That's right.
On the south side.
I remember that.
It was a hotel.
Hotel.
Hotel?
Yeah.
Were there some single-family homes too, though?
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Other comments? Yes, Jimmy.
Yes. So you have about 88,000 square feet currently, a footprint here now?
I think that's right, but it's been a while since I looked at that number, so don't hold me to that. I'll have
And
to.
are we talking 3-story, 4-story, 5-story, what are we, and then layering the top floors up back?
Well, I think we're going to have different stories depending, in order to address the context of the downtown site. As we're continue to compile the information about meeting spaces and office spaces and what we need, that's going to help us generate that number and be able to look at it and say, does that seem high, not high? Do we need to revisit some of the spaces that we're providing in there? And then we'll really start shaping it. I think in preliminary discussions, the square side, and talking with the DRC at Historic, we've talked about we don't want to overpower the courthouse. 231 is certainly the high end of a height and massing standpoint. If we push the building back at all from the alignment with the face of the courthouse to create a deeper plaza to enhance more performance type space and gathering space, then that will take some footprint area away. But we're definitely talking multi-story. I think it'll be a combination of 2 and 3
Do
story.
we see the city doubling in size with staff and needs for services and all? I know we've got several other properties throughout the city, so they wouldn't all be here, but if you're utilizing this much square footage now, do you see 20 years from now needing 200,000 feet per city?
I can't answer that yet,
150,000 feet?
but that's part of what we're working on, is to be able to answer that and talk about what's needed now and what might be needed long-term, and is there a way to bridge that gap as opposed to doing it all now. So we'll be having a lot of conversations about that.
Building can be built out or added on at a later date and increase it to 300,000 feet or 400,000 feet. So my point is, you're looking at $500 a foot nowadays. You know, if you're 200,000 foot, that's $100 million. That 25 million mentioned will never touch what we're even thinking about right now. It would be much closer to 100 million, in my estimate, for only 200,000 feet. It's a big pill to swallow for sure for everybody, but it's got to happen somehow, whether you do a joint partnership with private as well and let them pay the toll or something. But good luck.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Certainly. Others?
Will the
Alma?
work from home numbers be included in this for the employees?
That's been
Because
part of the
that's
conversation with all of the
changed,
departments to determine, especially from what they've learned in this last year, about who can and who is appropriate to work from home and what the operational decisions are on the city's behalf. So we're continuing
That
those
is part of
conversations with them.
okay, of the equation, okay.
Sure.
Commissioner Williamson?
Yeah, just thinking too about, comment about that this has to be flexible, because what's happening now is not gonna be what probably we'll need in 50 years or even what we want. So just even from the architectural standpoint, just thinking about the structure, because I know different building types are easier to renovate than others. And so, you know, we want to build this for 100 years, but we also want to build it so we can renovate it.
Absolutely.
So with that idea, and I know sometimes too, just, you know, if maybe our capacity isn't anticipated for until another 25 years to go up, I've seen, you know, different buildings where they make structural provisions so that additional floors can be added on, or things massively redone when that pressure builds that it needs to change and you
Sure.
have a budget.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner?
Great. Other comments?
You know, I was sitting here thinking, we're great high-level thinkers. We have some of the best architects around, great staff. We'll figure all that out. One of the things I do want to tell you, I've been sitting here the whole time and I was waiting. We mentioned on page 11, 13, and 14, historic display. And I'm telling you, when I walked into the courthouse the first time when it first opened, several things hit me. I went to throw up, I went to punch somebody, and I was hurt. I walked out and I said, until I'm called for any kind of court or anything, I will never go back. I called the city mayor, and I tell you, I said some choice words to him. One thing I want to say to you guys, to everybody here, and I've learned as I've gotten older, I've mellowed out a little bit. You probably couldn't tell it. But sometimes out of ignorance, no, you can't tell it. Sometimes out of ignorance, and sometimes we are a very diverse city. You probably can't tell it sometimes by looking around you. But I want to make sure that if you need to call me, because if you need somebody who looks like me, who's not a yes person, to tell you the God and heaven truth about something, if your hair ever starts to stand up on the back of your neck about something historic about this city, please don't put anything in City Hall that makes someone who looks like me or doesn't look like you want to cry, punch somebody, or defecate on something in this City Hall, okay?
Absolutely.
History is fine, but we need to make sure that people feel comfortable when they walk inside City Hall. As I sat here and thought about, as you were talking about the history of the square and all of that, I thought about the history of the square for people who look like me too, okay?
Absolutely.
So we need to be careful about historic displays inside City Hall, because the people who did the courthouse weren't. But I figured out, when I was served on the board of mayor and aldermen, that sometimes it's just plain old ignorance, okay?
Right.
And so as you sit around your meeting tables and as you're discussing things and you look around and you don't see somebody who looks like me, you might want to pass it by somebody who looks like me, who isn't afraid to tell you no, though, okay? And I know, and this may make you uncomfortable, and if it does, too bad. Get over it, okay?
Not at all.
Because that's part of the problem, I think, sometimes in this country, is we don't want to be uncomfortable. And sometimes people who look like me don't want to make you uncomfortable. But I feel very strongly about this, because that's exactly how I felt when I walked in there and saw what was in the very middle of the courthouse, and I thought they couldn't have been thinking, or maybe they were. Okay,
Right.
so I don't want to deny history, but let's just make sure that we do it the right way when we do it. So we'll get the architecture right, we'll even get the budget right, we'll get the square footage right, but let's just make sure we get everything right about it, so that when we come in here, because you know everybody pays taxes, then we just do all of it right. So like I said, if you need my number, because I'll tell you the unvarnished truth about it all.
That's what
And that's
we
all I
want.
have to say about it.
That-
Thank
That's
you.
great. No, and we agree completely with you. It needs to be very inclusive and tell the whole story where those exhibits.
Because history, believe me, all the history buffs are going to be out about it, and they should be, because I'm not just denying it. We just need to do it right.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great points, Marcia. Thank you. We have consumed our time. I think that from what I've gathered, that if either any of us have more comments or suggestions, we're welcome to post them.
Welcome to post them, and Vernon and Kelly and Joe
Right.
with city staff are all, we're talking weekly, if not
Right.
daily, about the project. So please do, if you wake up in the middle of the night and think of something you forgot to ask or that you wanted to say or add to the conversation, we are looking for all of that, and we really want everybody's feedback. So thank
Right.
you all again for taking the time.
Thank you. Is there anything else we need to consider in the joint conceptual? Okay, with that, I will call this meeting adjourned.